The scene flashes back 10 minutes. Standing before a bustling Hainanese chicken rice stall in the Tanjong Pagar Plaza Market and Food Center was a man with a shock of white hair, gazing intently at the glistening steamed chicken and fragrant rice. This was Hans, 68, fresh from Munich, Germany, having flown into Singapore 2 weeks prior. His son, Marcus, a manager at a multinational tech company in Singapore, had been living here for 5 years and had persuaded his father to visit for an extended stay. Hans, a retired senior engineer from BMW, had dedicated 40 years to the company in Munich. His career had instilled in him the meticulous, systematic precision often associated with German culture. Before his arrival, his impressions of this island city-state were shaped by documentaries from the 1980 seconds, portraying it as a rapidly developing nation, perhaps a bit chaotic, with older buildings and a populace still adapting to modern conveniences. However, the moment his plane touched down at Changi Airport, Hans realized his preconceptions were entirely wrong. The airport's cutting-edge modernity stunned him. The automated immigration gates were even faster and smoother than those at Frankfurt Airport, and the staff were professional and welcoming. His astonishment grew as Marcus drove him from the airport into the city center. The expressways were immaculate, bordered by lush greenery, and the skyline was a breathtaking panorama of gleaming skyscrapers. Every few blocks, a convenience store or a stylish cafe beckoned. The MRT system was a marvel of connectivity, clean and punctual, effortlessly weaving through the urban tapestry. He noticed an abundance of luxury cars, including Teslas and Porsches, seemingly more numerous than even in Munich. "Is this really Singapore?" Hans couldn't help but ask Marcus, his voice tinged with disbelief. "It's nothing like I imagined," Marcus chuckled. "Singapore has evolved so much, Dad. We're a global financial hub and a leader in technology and innovation. Our port is one of the busiest in the world, and our infrastructure is world-class. Did you know we're often ranked among the smartest cities globally?" Hans listened, half believing, half skeptical. As an engineer, he understood the importance of global standing, but seeing the actual development of the city-state firsthand was profoundly impactful. Marcus took him grocery shopping at a nearby supermarket, where Hans marveled at the shelves brimming with goods. Premium fruits imported from Japan, cheeses and wines from Europe. Everything imaginable. The electronic payment systems were far more convenient than in Germany. Even the aunties at the wet market stalls accepted mobile payments. 2 weeks into his stay at his son's apartment, Hans gradually accustomed himself to Singapore's rhythm. The sheer convenience of life here far exceeded his expectations. 24-hour convenience stores offered everything from bill payments to ticket purchases, and food delivery services were so efficient that a craving for anything at midnight could be satisfied with a few taps on an app. The internet speed was so rapid he could video call his German friends without any lag. Yet, a lingering question persisted in Hans's mind. Singapore, for all its modernity, seemed to lack a certain something. In Munich, he relished his trips to traditional markets, chatting with vendors and soaking in the warmth of human connection. Here, despite every convenience, he felt a faint absence of that everyday vitality, that smell of life. Then, one evening, Marcus returned home from work, brimming with excitement. "Dad, tonight I'm taking you to a hawker center. You'll experience the real Singaporean food culture." Hans, donning lighter clothing, followed his son out. As they approached the entrance of the Tanjong Pagar Plaza Market and Food Center, he froze. Before him stretched a vast, brightly lit expanse, lined with countless food stalls. The aroma of spices, grilled meats, and simmering broths mingled in the air, creating a unique and intoxicating perfume. The crowd was dense but not overwhelming. It pulsed with a vibrant, convivial energy. "What is this place?" Hans asked, wide-eyed. "This is a hawker center, Dad," Marcus explained with a smile. "You'd never see anything like this in Germany. These places are bustling, from early morning until late night. Look at all the stalls, they sell everything, and the prices are incredibly reasonable. Hawker centers are a cornerstone of Singaporean culture. You really need to experience them to understand how Singaporeans live." Hans followed his son deeper into the market, immediately drawn to the different stalls. He watched chefs deftly tossing noodles in woks, the sizzling sounds of char kway teow filling the air. The rich fragrance of laksa, with its coconut milk and seafood, wafted from another stall. He saw vibrant bubble teas, beautifully layered in transparent cups, looking both appealing and refreshing. "Wait here, I'll go grab a few things for you to try," Marcus said, disappearing into the crowd. Hans stood, observing his surroundings. Despite the density of the stalls and the throngs of people, the floor was remarkably clean, with hardly any litter visible. Each stall had its own bins, and vendors were diligent about cleanliness. What truly surprised him, however, was the order amidst the chaos. There was no pushing or shoving. Everyone waited patiently in line. Even the smallest stalls adhered to unspoken rules. This was a stark contrast to some open-air markets he'd seen in Germany. Munich's Christmas markets, while festive, could quickly descend into disarray with discarded plates and cups littering the ground, and the air thick with the smell of beer and greasy sausages. Here, despite being more crowded and dense, there was a palpable sense of organization and respect. Marcus returned, his hands full with a diverse array of delights. Crispy prawn fritters, satay skewers, and a refreshing sugarcane juice. "Here, try this Hainanese chicken rice first. It's a national icon." Hans took a bite, and the succulent chicken, fragrant rice, and aromatic chili sauce exploded in his mouth. The balance of flavors was exquisite. "Ah, this tastes truly excellent," he exclaimed, genuinely impressed. "Right? Singapore's hawker food is amazing. Don't let these roadside stalls fool you. Many of these hawkers are masters of their craft, with recipes passed down through generations. And the prices are unbelievable. This plate of chicken rice is only about $4 to $5. You couldn't even buy a coffee for that in Germany." Father and son walked and ate, with Marcus enthusiastically introducing various local delicacies. Hans realized that Singapore's hawker culture was indeed unique. It wasn't just a place to buy food, it was a vibrant social arena. He saw young people laughing around a dart game stall, an elderly couple holding hands, slowly sharing a plate of fried carrot cake, and parents patiently waiting for their children at a balloon stall. They eventually arrived at a popular Hainanese chicken rice stall, marked by a long queue. Behind the gleaming glass counter, rows of perfectly poached chickens hung, alongside steaming pots of rice. "You absolutely have to try this," Marcus urged. Hainanese chicken rice is the soul of Singaporean food. You choose your cut, and MDM. Lee here will prepare it fresh, with her special sauces. It's truly delicious. "How do I order?" Hans asked, feeling a little overwhelmed by the choices. "It's simple. You just tell MDM. Lee what you want, like chicken breast or thigh, and if you want roasted or steamed. You can also specify if you want extra sauce or chili," Marcus explained. Hans watched as MDM. Lee, a woman in her late 50s with a warm, welcoming smile and a neat hairnet, expertly chopped chicken for the customers ahead. When it was his turn, he pointed to a chicken thigh, and using his rudimentary English, said, "Steamed, please. No chili, thank you." "Medium." Lee nodded, her smile unwavering. "Sure, coming right up." She deftly placed a chicken thigh on her chopping block, picked up her cleaver, and began to chop. Just then, an unexpected mishap occurred. Halfway through, her hand slipped slightly, and the cleaver veered, turning a perfectly good piece of chicken into several uneven fragments. She paused, looking up at Hans with an expression of genuine apology. "Oh dear, I'm so sorry, sir. I accidentally spoiled this piece. It doesn't look good, and it won't be enjoyable to eat." Before Hans could react, MDM, Lee swept the ill-cut pieces aside. "Here, I'll get you a fresh new piece of chicken. The one I just messed up is on me." With that, she reached into the display, grabbed a larger, pristine piece of chicken, and began to chop it with extra care, each cut precise and even, arranging the pieces beautifully on a bed of fragrant rice. She then added a generous dollop of her special ginger and dark soy sauces. "So sorry for the wait," she said, handing the plate to Hans, along with a pair of chopsticks and some tissues. Hans took the plate and reached for his wallet. MDM. Lee glanced at his order. "That'll be S." "Iswas." Hans handed her as 10 note, and she returned $, 5 inches change. As Hans prepared to leave, mid-M, Lee suddenly called out, "Sir, wait!" From a warming pot beside her, she ladled out a small bowl of clear soup. "This is for you, for making you wait earlier. It's our special chicken broth, very nourishing." Hans was taken aback. He had never expected such service. In Germany, if a restaurant or shop made a mistake, the most he'd typically get was an apology. Rarely would they offer compensation, let alone a free item. Yet, this hawker stall, for a minor error, not only replaced the food without charge but also offered a complimentary bowl of soup. "Thank you, really, thank you," Hans stammered, a mix of German and English tumbling out. He took the warm soup. "Medium." Lee simply smiled and waved her hand. "You're welcome. Come again." Then she turned to serve the next customer. Hans carried his chicken, rice, and soup to a nearby table. Marcus joined him. "What's wrong, Dad? You look a bit emotional." "That stall owner." Hans began in German, his voice slightly trembling. "She cut the chicken badly, and she replaced it, didn't charge me, and then gave me free soup." "That sort of thing would never happen in Germany." Marcus smiled. "That's Singapore, Dad. Our hawkers, even though they run small businesses, truly value their customers. And you know, Singaporeans do business not just for profit, but also for reputation and maintaining good relationships with the community." Hans picked up a piece of chicken. The flavor was indeed exceptional. The chicken was tender and juicy, the rice perfectly infused with the essence of ginger and pandan, and the sauces provided a delightful kick. He sipped the soup, a comforting warmth spread through him, subtly spiced with traditional herbs. But it wasn't just the food that warmed him. It was MDM. Lee's genuine apology, her sincere desire to please the customer, her spirit of generosity and quality service, regardless of the small cost. It deeply moved him. After finishing their meal, father and son continued to wander through the hawker center. This time, Hans looked at everything with different eyes. He noticed that every vendor put immense care into their craft. A clothes seller carefully helped a customer pick the right size and style. A toy vendor patiently demonstrated how to play with a new gadget. A fruit seller eagerly told customers which fruits were freshest and sweetest. They stopped by a stall selling traditional kopi coffee and tete. Hans watched as the kopi uncle skillfully pulled the tea between two containers, creating a frothy, rich brew. "This stall has been here for 30 years, Marcus explained. The uncle still hand brews his kopi every day, sticking to the traditional methods. No shortcuts or artificial additives. You see the queue? That tells you about the quality." Hans queued for a cup of kopi. The rich, robust flavor, with its hint of condensed milk, was unlike anything he'd tasted from an automated machine. It was deeply satisfying, far surpassing any €5 coffee he might have had in Munich. Yet, it cost less than $2. "Marcus," Hans said suddenly, "I've discovered something." "What is it?" "The way Singaporeans do business is completely different from Germans. In Germany, businesses are highly focused on efficiency and rules. Everything is by the book. If there's a problem, it's resolved according to procedure, with very little personal touch. But Singaporeans are different. They treat customers like friends. They build relationships alongside doing business." Marcus nodded. "Exactly, Dad. That's one of Singapore's most precious qualities. You know, many foreigners rate Singapore's service industry as one of the best in the world, not because we have the most advanced facilities, but because we have hardware." "Hardware?" Hans repeated, a curious glint in his eye. "Yes, hardware. Here in Singapore, many things aren't just about profit or transaction. They're about relationships and feelings, like MDM. Lee earlier, she could have just ignored the mistake, and you wouldn't have known. But she chose to be honest and offered compensation. This kind of integrity is common here because we believe that doing business is about conscience and reputation." Hans fell silent, his mind replaying various experiences in Germany. Once, he bought fruit from a supermarket, only to find a few rotten oranges when he got home. He returned with the receipt, demanding a replacement, but the staff was rude, insisting he should have checked at the counter and that they couldn't prove the oranges were bad beforehand. Though they grudgingly replaced them, the whole experience was unpleasant. Another time, in a restaurant, the waiter brought the wrong dish. When Hans pointed out the error, the waiter simply offered a cold apology and took the plate away, with no offer of compensation. These experiences had solidified his view that in Germany, customer business interactions were purely transactional: pay, get the goods, deal with problems by the book, with no warmth or flexibility. But in Singapore, he felt a completely different atmosphere. Here, businesses treated customers as individuals, not just wallets. They cared not just about the current sale, but about the long-term relationship, MDM. Lee's actions, though a small losses for her, were building trust and goodwill. "Dad, let me tell you a story," Marcus said. "Once when I first came to Singapore, I bought something at a convenience store. When I paid, I gave a S50 note, and after getting my change, he left. A little while later, the cashier out of the store, breathless, saying he accidentally given mess 10 too much and asked for it back. I was truly shocked, because I hadn't even noticed, and he wouldn't have known if I hadn't said anything. But he chased after me to return the money. When I asked him why, he said it was the right thing to do. I asked him if he wasn't afraid his boss would find out, and he said he had a clear conscience. It wasn't his money to keep. That's when I understood. Singaporeans' honesty isn't just about fearing consequences. It comes from a deep-seated belief in doing what's right. Hans listened, even more deeply touched. He had lived his entire life in Munich, a highly modernized city with robust legal systems and strict social norms. But he had never experienced this kind of spontaneous goodwill and honesty. In Germany, people obeyed rules out of fear of punishment. In Singapore, people did the right thing because they felt it was inherently correct. Father and son stayed at the hawker center until past 10 p.m. On the way home, Hans was quiet, and Marcus, sensing his father was deep in thought, didn't disturb him. Back at the apartment, Hans sat on the living room sofa and opened his laptop. He wanted to write an email to his old friends in Germany, sharing his day's experiences. But he found it hard to articulate the warmth he felt, the profound sense of being genuinely treated, with words. Finally, he typed a few sentences. Today, I visited a hawker center in Singapore. A small incident at a Hainanese chicken rice stall made me rethink what true civilization means. Perhaps in Germany we have better systems and regulations, but Singaporeans possess warmer hearts. The next morning, Hans woke unusually early. As Marcus prepared for work, he saw his father already dressed and sitting in the living room. Dad, any plans for today? I want to go to the Immigration and Checkpoints Authority to ask about something, Hans said. Ika? What do you want to ask? Marcus asked, a hint of confusion in his voice. I want to understand how to apply for long-term residency, Hans replied calmly. Last night, I thought about it deeply. I believe I want to stay in Singapore. Marcus was stunned. Are you serious? Absolutely serious. Hans looked at his son, his gaze firm. I've lived in Munich for over 60 years. It's where everything is familiar, but I've never felt the kind of warmth I experienced yesterday. The sincerity and goodwill shown by a hawker stall owner over a small mistake showed me what true quality of life means. But Dad, you have a house and friends in Germany. Won't living in Singapore be a big adjustment? Marcus, do you know? Hans stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. I've been retired for 2 years. My daily routine was reading, watching TV, and occasionally meeting old friends. My life felt rather uneventful and dull. But in these 2 weeks in Singapore, I've felt more vitality than in those 2 years back home. People here are energetic, passionate, and possess a genuine hardware. When I walk down the street, convenience store staff smile and say, "Welcome." Bus drivers patiently wait for me to tap my card. Strangers readily offer directions. These small things may seem insignificant, but together, they create a compelling reason to stay. Marcus listened to his father's words, feeling both moved and a little worried. Moved that his father had finally found a lifestyle that made him happy, but worried that the decision might be too hasty. Perhaps you should stay a little longer, Dad, and think it through carefully before deciding. I have thought it through very clearly. Hans turned back. I know what you're worried about. You're afraid I'm being impulsive. But I've lived for 68 years. When have I ever made an impulsive decision? I'm an engineer. I'm used to rational analysis. Before coming to Singapore, I admit I had prejudices, thinking it was just a small Asian island, probably still developing. But these 2 weeks have completely overturned my perceptions. Singapore's healthcare system is incredibly efficient, with polyclinics and public hospitals offering quality care. Your public transport system is advanced and affordable, with clean, punctual MRTs and extensive bus routes, even offering concessions for seniors. Your safety is also exceptional. I can walk on the streets late at night without worry, which is unimaginable in some parts of Munich. Most importantly, Hans walked back and sat on the sofa. The people here make me feel warm. In Germany, after retirement, I had almost no social life. Neighbors would just nod. Friends were busy with their own lives. But in Singapore, in just a few weeks, the auntie at the hawker center already remembers my preference. When I go for a walk in the botanic gardens, I meet elderly people who initiate conversations. Though the language barrier exists, the goodwill is real. Marcus pondered for a moment, then nodded. Okay, Dad. Since you've made up your mind, I support you. I'll take leave today and accompany you to the ICA. We'll understand the application process together. Thank you, son, Hans said, patting Marcus on the shoulder. After breakfast, the two set off for the ICA. In the car, Hans looked out at the city, a mix of excitement and trepidation in his heart. He recalled his younger days at BMW, when the company sent him to Japan for a business trip. That was his first exposure to Asian culture, and he was deeply impressed by the politeness and meticulousness. But that trip was only a week long. He hadn't had time to delve deeper. Later, he visited Singapore and Hong Kong for brief business trips. He saw the modernity of these Asian cities, comparable to Europe, but always felt something was missing. Now, he understood. Those cities, while developed, were overly commercialized, and the human connections felt cold. Singapore was different. It possessed both modern convenience and a surprising warmth of human touch. They arrived at the ICA building by 9 a.m. The lobby was already bustling with people handling various procedures, but the atmosphere was orderly, without undue noise or confusion. Hans noticed multilingual signs on the walls, including English, Malay, Mandarin, Tamil, and even German. This surprised him. A government agency accommodating so many different nationalities showcased the society's inclusiveness. Marcus led his father to a counter. They were greeted by a professional and friendly female officer in her 30s. "Hello, how may I help you?" she asked in fluent English. Marcus explained their purpose in Mandarin, and the officer immediately switched to Mandarin, her demeanor remaining professional and courteous. "All right. Which type of residency is your father interested in applying for?" "I'd like to understand the options for long-term residency," Hans said in English. The officer retrieved several documents and began to explain in detail. "For your situation, there are a few options. Firstly, as your son is working in Singapore, you could apply for a long-term visit pass as a dependent. Secondly, there's the option of investing if you have substantial capital to invest in Singapore. Thirdly, with your engineering background, if you wish to work or provide technical consultancy here, you could also apply for a work pass." She presented relevant forms and explanatory documents, clarifying each point. Hans realized she wasn't just reciting regulations, but genuinely analyzing which option suited him best. "Considering your circumstances, I recommend starting with the long-term visit pass. It's the quickest and simplest. Your son would just need to provide proof of employment and income, and you can apply. After a certain period of legal residency, you may even be eligible for permanent residency." "How long does it take?" Hans asked. "If all documents are in order, approval usually takes about 2 to 3 weeks, the officer explained. "However, I must remind you that a long-term visit pass does not permit you to work in Singapore. If you wish to work, you'll need to apply for a separate work permit." "I'm retired. I don't plan to work," Hans said. "I just want to live here." "Then there's no problem," the officer smiled. "I'll prepare a checklist for you, outlining all the required documents. Once you're ready, you can submit your application." She quickly printed a detailed checklist, bilingual in English and Mandarin, clearly indicating which documents needed translation and notarization. "If you have any questions, you can call this number or come directly to the counter, and we'll do our best to assist you." Hans took the documents, sincerely saying, "Thank you. Your service is truly excellent." "You're welcome. It's our duty," the officer smiled. "Welcome to Singapore." Leaving the ICA building, Hans remarked, "Did you see that? A civil servant can be so friendly and professional, completely devoid of bureaucracy. In Germany, government officials often have an indifferent attitude, as if doing you a favor." "That's Singapore, Dad," Marcus said. "Our civil servants are truly there to serve the people, not to act superior. Of course, there are a few with bad attitudes, but most are very dedicated and responsible." Over the next few days, Hans began preparing his application documents. He contacted his lawyer in Germany to assist with various certifications. In the meantime, he didn't stay idle. Every day, he and Marcus ventured out to explore different corners of Singapore. They visited Joo Chiat Road, a street preserved with many old shophouses, offering traditional Peranakan goods and foods. Hans was captivated by the old-world charm. He saw shopkeepers diligently preparing traditional delicacies, adhering to age-old recipes without artificial additives. A Chinese medicine shop owner patiently explained the efficacy of various herbs. Though Hans understood little, the dedication and professionalism left a deep impression. They went to the National Museum of Singapore, and Hans was awestruck by the exquisite artifacts and interactive exhibits. He realized that Singapore wasn't just technologically advanced, but also deeply committed to cultural preservation. The museum's guided tours were comprehensive, available in multiple languages, and the exhibits were thoughtfully curated, allowing visitors to truly appreciate the value of these historical treasures. They visited the Singapore Botanic Gardens, discovering the city's natural beauty. Hans hadn't imagined such a serene and lush green space adjacent to a modern metropolis. The walking paths were well maintained, with clear signages and rest stops. The dedication to public amenities once again underscored Singapore's progress. One day, They sought out a wellness retreat for a relaxing afternoon. Hans had initially associated such experiences with specific countries like Japan for hot springs. He hadn't realized Singapore offered such well-developed options. They chose a heritage-inspired spa within a city hotel. Soaking in a warm herbal bath, Hans felt all his fatigue melt away. "Dad, you know," Marcus said, relaxing in the bath. "Singapore, though small in land area, is incredibly rich in experiences. We have bustling city life, beautiful gardens, diverse cultural enclaves, and lovely coastal areas. And because we're so compact, everything is incredibly accessible. If you want to see greenery, a short drive takes you to nature parks. If you want a beach, Sentosa is just a quick trip. Unlike Germany, where a beach holiday might mean hours of driving." Hans nodded. "And I've noticed Singaporeans truly know how to enjoy life. Though you work hard, you also know how to relax. Hawker centers, spas, garden visits, cycling along park connectors, various leisure activities are prevalent. This attitude towards life is much more balanced than the German rigidity and seriousness." "Exactly. Our philosophy here is to work hard and play hard," Marcus laughed. "And we value family greatly. Weekends are usually spent with family, unlike the more individualistic approach in many Western countries." After the spa, they explored a nearby local market. Hans was once again drawn to the market culture. It wasn't just a place to buy things. It felt like a community hub. Vendors and customers weren't engaged in cold transactions but chatted and interacted like friends. An elderly vegetable seller, seeing Hans, an elderly foreigner, even picked out a few exceptionally fresh asparagus for him. "Welcome to Singapore. This is a gift for you." This pervasive goodwill and warmth solidified Hans's decision. 2 weeks later, Hans received the documents from his German lawyer. He organized everything and returned to the ICA to submit his application. This time, the process was incredibly smooth. The officer meticulously checked each document, confirming everything was in order before accepting the submission. "You'll receive a result in about 2 to 3 weeks. We'll notify you then to collect your long-term visit pass." During this waiting period, Hans continued to explore Singapore. He found himself growing fonder of the place, not just for its convenience and progress, but primarily for its people. One afternoon, while walking alone in a neighborhood park, he encountered a group of elderly residents practicing Tai Chi. He stood watching for a while. An old gentleman approached him, using simple English to strike up a conversation. Though language was a barrier, the old man warmly invited him to join, patiently demonstrating the movements. Hans followed along for a bit. Despite his clumsy actions, everyone was very accepting and encouraging. From that day on, Hans went to the park every morning to practice Tai Chi with the group. Gradually, he began to learn some simple Mandarin phrases. Zeo, an, good morning, xie, thank you, zaijian, goodbye. Though his pronunciation was imperfect, everyone understood and was delighted by his effort to learn. An elderly lady even taught him some basic Malay phrases like selamat pagi, good morning. Hans found the pronunciation interesting, perhaps even harder than Mandarin, but he diligently learned. The seniors were touched by his eagerness. Some even offered to teach him English or Mandarin informally, asking for no fee, simply hoping he could integrate faster into Singaporean life. This selfless kindness deeply moved Hans. In Germany, after retirement, he had barely made new friends. His days were mostly spent at home. But in Singapore, in just over a month, he had already connected with so many people. Though languages might differ, their hearts connected. One afternoon, Hans went to explore a bookstore. He discovered that Singapore's bookstore culture was vibrant. It wasn't just a place to sell books, but a cultural space. Modern bookstores often had cafes, local artisan products, and art exhibitions. Many people relaxed there, reading and conversing. Hans picked up a few books on Singapore's history and culture. Although they were mostly in English, he wanted to slowly learn more. At the checkout, the assistant noticed his selections and recommended a few English-translated Singaporean literary works. "These books are classics and can help you understand Singapore," the assistant said. "And this one has a bilingual English-Mandarin text, which might help you with your Mandarin." Hans thanked the assistant for the suggestions and bought the books. Later, he passed a small independent bookstore and saw a beautifully photographed book on Singaporean hawker food displayed in the window. He went inside to browse. The owner, a gentleman in his 60s with a scholarly air, approached him. "This is an excellent book," the owner said. The author spent years traveling across Singapore, documenting traditional hawker dishes. Each dish has a story, a cultural heritage behind it. Hans decided to buy the book. As the owner wrapped it, they chatted. Learning that Hans was German and applying for residency in Singapore, the owner was delighted. Welcome. Welcome. Singapore might be small, but it has a big heart. I'm sure you'll love it here. I already do, Hans said. The people here are all so kind. That's because we Singaporeans believe that being kind to others is being kind to ourselves, the owner smiled. You know, Singapore was once quite poor and went through very tough times. It was during those difficult years that we learned to help each other, to cherish human connections. Now our lives are better. But that tradition has been preserved. These words deeply resonated with Hans. He thought of Germany, where despite its affluence, human relationships often felt cold, with everyone living in their own world, rarely extending care to others. But in Singapore, even strangers were willing to lend a hand. This social atmosphere was truly precious. 3 weeks later, the ICA called to inform Hans that his long-term visit pass was ready for collection. That day, Marcus took leave to accompany his father. As Hans received the card, his hand trembled slightly. This card wasn't just a legal document. It marked the beginning of a new chapter in his life. Congratulations, the officer said with a smile. Welcome as a new resident of Singapore. Stepping out of the ICA building, Hans took a deep breath. The Singapore air carried the fresh scent of a recent rain. In the distance, the iconic Marina Bay Sands and other skyscrapers shimmered under the sun. This city was now officially his home. Shall we celebrate? Marcus asked. What do you feel like eating? Let's go to Tanjong Pagar Plaza Market, Hans said without hesitation. I want to go back to MDM. Lee's Hainanese chicken rice stall. In the early evening, father and son returned to the hawker center. It was as lively as ever, bustling with people, the air thick with the aroma of food. Hans led Marcus directly to MDM. Lee's stall. The owner's eyes lit up when she saw Hans. Oh, it's you! Long time no see, she exclaimed with a smile. What would you like today? Same as last time, Hans said, his Mandarin imperfect but significantly improved. MDM, Lee happily replied. Good, your Mandarin has improved. She skillfully prepared Hans's order. This time there were no mishaps. She chopped the chicken perfectly and seasoned it evenly. As Hans paid, he pulled out his newly issued long-term visit pass from his wallet and showed it to MDM. Lee, I can live in Singapore now, he said in Mandarin. Although his grammar wasn't perfect, the meaning was clear. MDM. Lee was overjoyed to see the pass. Wow, congratulations, congratulations. You're going to live in Singapore? That's wonderful, she exclaimed. Then from now on, when you come, I'll give you a discount. No need for a discount, Hans said earnestly. I want to pay the full price. Your chicken rice is worth it. Mayem. Lee's eyes welled up slightly. You foreigners, you're even more polite than us Singaporeans, she laughed. Then, she took an unopened packet of her special Hainanese chicken rice chili sauce from beside her. Here, this is for you. Take it home and eat with your meals. It's our family's secret recipe. You can't buy this anywhere else. Hans accepted the packet, his heart warm. He knew this wasn't just a packet of seasoning. It was a gesture of acceptance, a warm welcome, and a genuine expression of human connection. Father and son took their chicken rice to a table. Hans picked up a piece of chicken, savoring it slowly. The taste was still excellent. But this time, it felt different. Last time, he was a curious tourist. But this time, he was a resident, a part of this city, a new member of this society. Do you regret it? Marcus suddenly asked. Regret? Hans laughed. My only regret is not coming sooner. If I had known Singapore was this wonderful, I should have come with you when you first moved here. You know, Hans put down his chopsticks and looked at the bustling hawker center. In Germany, we always chase efficiency and rules, believing that as long as the systems are well established, society will function perfectly. But we overlook the most important thing, the warmth between people. Singapore has shown me what a truly progressive society is. It's not just about advanced technology and comprehensive systems, but more importantly, about warm hearts. Your convenience store staff genuinely smile at customers. Your bus drivers patiently wait for seniors to board. Your hawkers sincerely apologize for a small mistake with a piece of chicken. These small things may seem insignificant, but together, they form the warmth of a society. Listening to his father's words, Marcus's eyes also grew a little misty. He had lived in Singapore for 5 years and had long fallen in love with the place. But hearing his father say it made him truly realize Singapore's preciousness. Welcome home, Dad, Marcus said. Yes, home, Hans replied with a smile, picking up the bowl of complimentary soup from MDM. Lee. He took a sip. The temperature of the soup was just right, just like how Singapore felt to him. Warm and comforting, a place he never wanted to leave. The lights of the hawker center twinkled, the crowds surged, and the aroma of food still filled the air. And in this vibrant throng, a German old man had found his new belonging, a home that filled him with warmth. Months later, Hans had fully adapted to life in Singapore. Every morning, he went to the park to practice Tai Chi. In the afternoons, he visited bookstores or met up with his new friends at a local cafe. In the evenings, he and Marcus often cooked together or visited a hawker center for dinner. His Mandarin had improved rapidly, allowing him to hold simple daily conversations. Although he still had an accent, he was understood. He enrolled in a course at a community center, studying Mandarin and Singaporean history. His classmates, knowing he was a retired German engineer, were curious why he chose to settle in Singapore. Hans would always smile and say, "Because of a piece of chicken rice." The answer puzzled everyone, but Hans didn't elaborate. He knew that what truly made him stay wasn't just that piece of chicken rice, but the values and culture it represented. The commitment to quality, the respect for customers, the honesty in admitting mistakes, and the importance placed on human connection. These, he knew, were Singapore's most precious assets. One day, Hans encountered a young American who had recently moved to Singapore in his neighborhood. The young man complained that salaries in Singapore were lower than in the US, and prices weren't cheap, feeling that Singapore had nothing special to offer. Hans listened, then earnestly told him, "Young man, don't just look at the superficial numbers. Singapore's value isn't about how much money you can earn, but what kind of life you can live. Here, you have excellent healthcare, convenient transportation, a safe environment, and most importantly, warm hearts. These are things money cannot buy." The young American nodded, seemingly understanding. Hans knew some things needed time to be truly appreciated, just as he himself had taken that small hawker center incident to truly grasp Singapore's beauty. Now, Hans lived a fulfilling and joyful life every day. He finally understood that the meaning of life wasn't about which country you lived in, what car you drove, or what house you owned, but whether you felt warmly treated, accepted by society, and truly alive. And Singapore had given him all of that. He visited Medium, Lee's Hainanese chicken rice stall at Tanjong Pagar Plaza Market every week. Medium. Lee had remembered his preferences and prepared his order without him even having to ask. Sometimes, when business was busy, Hans would even help to clear tables or return used crockery, just like family. Once, when MDM, Lee's son, got married, she even specially invited Hans to the wedding. That day, Hans donned his formal suit and brought a carefully chosen gift. At the wedding, he witnessed the warmth and sincerity of a Singaporean celebration, feeling the strong bonds between family and friends. His heart was filled with both emotion and envy. At the end of the banquet, Medium, Lee held Hans's hand. "You're like one of our own family, Uncle Hans. Thank you for choosing Singapore. Thank you for seeing the good in us." In that moment, tears welled in Hans's eyes. For the first time in years, he felt such a deep sense of belonging. Not by blood, not by nationality, but by the connection of hearts, by sincere interactions, and by the most beautiful parts of human nature. A year later, some of Hans's old friends from Germany came to visit him in Singapore. They carried curiosity and questions, wanting to know why their old friend had given up the comfortable retirement life in Germany to choose a small Asian city-state. Hans took them around Singapore's streets, visiting the National Museum, enjoying the Botanic Gardens, exploring Joo Chiat Road, and of course, they went to MDM, Lee's Hainanese chicken rice stall. There, Hans recounted the story from a year ago. His friends listened and laughed, thinking he was overly sentimental, making such a monumental decision over a small incident. But after spending a few days in Singapore, personally experiencing its lifestyle and feeling its hardware, they stopped laughing. Some began to seriously ask Hans about the details of the residency process. Others started considering if they too should stay in Singapore for a longer period. As they left, one of Hans's old friends told him, "I understand now why you stayed. There's truly something special here that Germany doesn't have." "Yes," Hans smiled. "Here, there's warmth, human connection, and a true meaning to life. I lived in Germany for over 60 years, but it wasn't until I came to Singapore that I truly felt alive." As night fell, the lights of the Tanjong Pagar Plaza Market lit up once more. Han stood before the familiar Hainanese chicken rice stall, watching Mebdam. Lee expertly prepare the food, his heart filled with gratitude. He was grateful for that unexpected incident, for that piece of chicken, for that bowl of soup, for that sincere apology. Because it was these small things that changed the course of his life, leading him to find his true home. In this rapidly changing world, in this era where human connections often grow distant, Singapore had preserved some of its most precious assets. The warmth of human hearts, the depth of human relationships, and the kindness of human nature. And these, Hans now knew, were the true signs of a society's progress, its true civilization, and its enduring beauty.